In 1961, Hannah Arendt sat in a Jerusalem courtroom staring at the man who organized the murder of millions. She expected a monster. What she found was far more terrifying. Adolf Eichmann was ordinary, disturbingly, boringly ordinary. He cracked jokes. He followed procedures. He simply stopped thinking. The greatest evil is not radical but banal. Arendt realized something that would haunt her until her death. The Holocaust wasn't carried out by demons. It was executed by bureaucrats who filed paperwork and went home to dinner. Ordinary people doing evil. And she saw this pattern everywhere. Not just in Nazi Germany. In every society where people surrender their capacity to think. She left us a warning. A prophecy about what happens when we drown in information but starve for truth. When we're bombarded with so many contradictions that reality itself becomes negotiable. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. That warning was meant for all of us, and today it's more urgent than ever. The ordinary monster. Adolf Eichmann sat behind bulletproof glass, a balding man with spectacles, nervously shuffling papers. He looked like an accountant, because in many ways that's exactly what he was, an accountant of death. He kept meticulous records, train schedules, deportation quotas, the logistics of genocide. When prosecutors showed him evidence of the horrors he orchestrated, he didn't flinch. He explained procedures. He cited regulations. He spoke of career advancement. He had simply been doing his job. Hannah Arendt watched this performance day after day. She had fled Nazi Germany herself in 1933. She had studied totalitarianism for decades, but nothing prepared her for Eichmann's sheer emptiness. He wasn't a fanatic consumed by hatred. He was something far more common and far more dangerous. He was a man who had stopped thinking. The trouble with Eichmann was precisely that so many were like him, and that the many were neither perverted nor sadistic, but were terribly and terrifyingly normal. This realization would become the foundation of her most controversial idea. But what she discovered next would shake the philosophical world to its core. Banality of evil. Arendt coined a phrase that would make her infamous. The banality of evil, not because evil is unimportant, but because it often wears the most boring disguise. Banal. Think about what that word means. Ordinary, commonplace, unremarkable. The greatest horror in human history wasn't driven by exceptional monsters. It was driven by people who wanted promotions, who wanted to fit in, who wanted to follow orders without the burden of thinking about consequences. This wasn't a defense of Eichmann. It was an indictment of something far larger. The machinery of evil doesn't require villains. It requires people who have surrendered their capacity for independent thought. Thoughtless compliance enables evil. Her critics were furious. How dare she call evil banal? How dare she deny the demonic nature of the Nazis? But Arendt wasn't minimizing evil. She was exposing its true face. If this wisdom is opening your eyes to something you've never considered, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of human psychology, because what comes next might disturb you even more. The question wasn't just about Eichmann, it was about all of us. The thinking crisis. What does it actually mean to think? Not to calculate, not to follow instructions, but to truly think. Arendt spent her entire career wrestling with this question, and her answer was radical. Thinking, she argued, is not intelligence. Eichmann was intelligent. He solved complex logistical problems. He was efficient and organized. Intelligence without thinking is the most dangerous combination. Real thinking requires something else entirely. It requires an internal dialogue, a conversation between you and yourself. It requires the willingness to question your own actions from the perspective of others, to imagine how your choices appear to humanity. Eichmann never had this conversation. When asked if he ever considered the moral implications of his work, he looked confused. He was following orders. He was doing what was expected. The mind that stops questioning becomes capable of anything. Arendt saw this as a modern epidemic, not just in totalitarian regimes, but in any society that discourages genuine reflection. and she identified exactly how this epidemic spreads. Loneliness trap. Here's something that will change how you see the modern world. Arendt distinguished between two types of being alone: solitude and loneliness. Solitude versus loneliness. Solitude is being alone with yourself. It's where thinking happens, where you have that internal dialogue, where you remain company for yourself. Loneliness is different. Loneliness is being abandoned by yourself. It's the terrifying experience of having lost your own company. And here's her crucial insight. Loneliness doesn't require physical isolation. You can be lonelier in a crowd than in an empty room. The experience of not belonging to the world is one of the most radical experiences of humans. Lonely people are desperate. They'll believe anything that makes them feel they belong. They'll follow any leader who offers them a place in a movement. They'll surrender their judgment for the comfort of being part of something larger. What prepares men for totalitarian domination is the fact that loneliness has become an everyday experience. This wasn't just about Nazi Germany anymore. This was about any society that manufactures loneliness. But how exactly do tyrants exploit this vulnerability? The reality collapse. Totalitarian movements don't just tell lies. They do something far more sophisticated. They destroy the very concept of truth. When everything is a lie, nothing can be trusted. Arendt studied how propaganda works at scale. The goal isn't to make you believe one specific lie. The goal is to exhaust your ability to distinguish truth from fiction altogether. You're bombarded with contradictions. Yesterday's enemies become today's allies. Facts change based on political convenience. Leaders say one thing and do another without consequence. Eventually, something breaks inside you. Confusion. You stop trying to figure out what's true. You stop caring. And that's exactly what they want. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. Think about that. The perfect victim isn't the true believer. It's the cynic who believes nothing and therefore will accept anything. Cynicism is surrender. When you give up on truth, you give up on your ability to judge. And without judgment, you become infinitely manipulable. But there's an even darker dimension to this collapse. Facts vs. fiction. Arendt made a distinction that cuts to the heart of our current crisis. The difference between lying and creating a fictional reality. Traditional liars know what the truth is. They hide it strategically. They maintain a relationship with reality, even if it's adversarial. But modern manipulators don't hide truth. They replace it entirely. They construct alternative realities. Entire worldviews built on fabrication, where every inconvenient fact can be dismissed as fake, where consistency doesn't matter because there is no shared reality to be consistent with. News burns into smoke. Truth evaporates. What remains is pure spectacle. Arendt warned that people living in these fictional worlds become immune to argument. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. The result of a consistent and total substitution of lies for factual truth is not that the lies will now be accepted as truth, but that the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world is being destroyed. The damage isn't just believing wrong things. It's losing the ability to believe anything at all. And this leads to her most terrifying prediction. Mass movement. Why do intelligent people join destructive movements? Arendt's answer is unsettling, because these movements offer something irresistible, a world that makes sense. Simple answers, complex world. When reality feels overwhelming and contradictory, a movement provides certainty. When you feel atomized and alone, a movement provides belonging. When your individual life seems meaningless, a movement provides purpose. The trade is catastrophic. You surrender your capacity for independent thought. You accept the movement's version of reality without question. You become capable of anything the movement demands. Totalitarian movements are mass organizations of atomized, isolated individuals. This isn't about stupidity. Some of history's greatest minds got swept up in totalitarian ideologies. It's about the desperate human need for meaning and belonging. When society fails to provide these needs, monsters fill the vacuum. Arendt wasn't just describing the past. She was describing a permanent human vulnerability, one that can be exploited whenever conditions are right. But she also discovered something that gave her hope: judgment power. In her final, unfinished work, Arendt was exploring what she called the life of the mind. Specifically, the faculty of judgment. Judgment, not following rules, not calculating outcomes, but the ability to distinguish right from wrong in situations where no rule applies. This is what Eichmann lacked entirely, and it's what she believed we all must cultivate. Judgment requires imagination, the ability to put yourself in another's position, to see your actions from the perspective of the broader human community. Could I live with myself if I did this? Could I face others? These questions require thinking, real thinking, the kind that happens in solitude, not loneliness, the kind that maintains your relationship with yourself. Think, judge, resist. Arendt believed this capacity could not be taught through rules or indoctrination. It could only be developed through practice, through the habit of questioning, through refusing to surrender your mind to any authority, movement, or ideology. And this brings us to what her warning means for us today. Today's warning. Arendt died in 1975. She never saw the internet, never witnessed social media, never experienced the information apocalypse we navigate daily, and yet her warnings feel prophetic. She diagnosed a disease before it became a pandemic. Consider our world through her lens. We are more connected than ever, yet loneliness is epidemic. We have access to infinite information, yet truth feels impossible to locate. We scroll through contradictions until caring about reality seems exhausting. Algorithms feed us what we want to hear. Outrage is optimized. Nuance is punished. The internal dialogue that constitutes thinking is drowned in noise. The conditions she warned about are everywhere. Mass movements don't require uniforms anymore. They form online. They radicalize in private. They offer the same deadly bargain. Surrender your judgment. Join our version of reality. Belong. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. But her message wasn't despair. It was a call to action. The antidote. What would Arendt tell us today? First, protect your capacity to think. Guard your solitude. Create space where you can have that internal conversation without distraction, where you remain company for yourself. Second, resist the comfort of certainty. Whenever someone offers simple answers to complex questions, be suspicious. Reality is complicated. Anyone who says otherwise is selling something. Complexity is not weakness. Third, maintain your connection to facts, not interpretations, not narratives, but the stubborn, boring reality of what actually happened. When facts become negotiable, freedom dies. Seek truth as if your freedom depends on it, because it does. Fourth, never surrender your judgment. No leader, no movement, no algorithm should think for you. The moment you stop questioning is the moment you become capable of anything. Finally, remember that evil is not exceptional. It's not performed by monsters. It's performed by people who stop thinking. Your mind is your shield, and cultivating it is not just personal development. It's a moral duty. Hannah Arendt gave us a gift, not comfort, not easy answers, but the truth about how darkness spreads. It spreads through ordinary people who stop thinking, through loneliness that makes us desperate to belong, through lies so constant that truth itself becomes exhausted, through movements that offer meaning at the cost of judgment. The manifestation of the wind of thought is not knowledge, but the ability to tell right from wrong, beautiful from ugly. She witnessed the worst humanity could produce, and she spent her life understanding how it happened, not to condemn, but to prevent it from happening again. Think, question, judge, resist. The warning she left us is simple. Never stop thinking. Never surrender your judgment. Never accept a reality you haven't examined yourself. The banality of evil is not inevitable, but it requires vigilance. It requires each of us to maintain the internal dialogue that makes us human. If you made it this far, comment thinking shield if you're committed to never surrendering your mind. The wisdom of the ages is yours. Use it well. If this unlocked something in you, subscribe for more.